Good day, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you are well. This is Suidlanders, the week in review for Friday, the 17th of May, 2024. First things first, if you can hear a little bit of a humming noise in the background, I hope that it's not too distracting. It's fairly warm here today in Van der Kloof, and I'm trying to keep the air circulating and make it a little bit cooler as I record this video. Secondly, the lighting. I know that the lighting is not splendid. I worked in the live events industry for many years as a projects manager, and I used to sometimes tell people I haven't a clue about the technical stuff. I have no idea what we're doing. That's why I make sure that I work with the best people, and I've tinkered with this lighting on a few occasions, and I haven't been able to get it right. But as a matter of interest to you, one of our Suidlanders members is acknowledged as one of the top special events camera lighting guys in the world. You never know, maybe I'll be able to convince him to come and give me a hand. I'd like to begin by mentioning the work done last weekend by a team from Nico Engelbrecht's Communications Department. Suidlanders Communications Department, the head is Nico Engelbrecht. Many of you know him. He lives here in Van der Kloof, or just outside Van der Kloof. And last week I visited a seminar that he was conducting with top clever radio chaps on a very specific type of, or capacity of, radio communications. And it was very encouraging to hear from Nico that they were making progress, that they were developing a capacity that shall be of the utmost value to Suidlanders in the years that lie ahead of us. Nico, I wish you everything of the very best, and to your team, some of whom I knew, Frana for instance, to the gentleman who came up, and those guys who greeted me, introduced themselves to me, and to those guys who were too busy hunched over screens with unbelievable detail on them, all sorts of, I don't know, complicated theorems or something, I couldn't tell you, who were too busy with what they were doing. To all of you, I offer you my heartfelt encouragement, and I'm sure that I speak for thousands upon thousands of Suidlanders and hundreds of thousands of our people when I say, may you go from strength to strength in your endeavors, and may the work of your hands be blessed by our Lord, because it shall be invaluable, invaluable to our survival in the times that lie ahead of us. Next, please see the link below in the description box to Mr. Miller's video of last weekend on the passage of the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech bill late last week. He's already covered it very well. We're providing a link to his video. There's no point me doing it half as well as he could. If you haven't seen it, just have a look at that. Speaking of acts of parliament, during this week, the parliament passed the bitter Basic Education Laws Bella bill, and it now awaits signing into law by the President. 3 days ago, I was with Mr. Miller. We held a meeting. Gert arrived. We discussed some serious matters, and then the ladies joined us, and while we were sitting there, Mrs. Miller asked me my opinion on the Bella bill, and I said to her that it breaks my heart so that I cannot bring myself to read again, to listen again, to hear again, to watch again anything about that bill. It is beyond wicked, and it will destroy a generation or more of children. So I'm not going to elaborate too much. Let it suffice to say that it is clearly designed to destroy. No good could possibly come out of that set of laws. Again, there'll be a link below. You can read up on it for yourself if you can bear it. As if those two were not enough, on Wednesday, President Ramaphosa signed into law the National Health Insurance Act, which promises free health care for all. Once again, it's almost not worth getting into the details. We already all know that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It surely can't be for its stated purposes. Just a casual glance reveals that it shall falter at the first hurdle. It could never possibly succeed in its stated objective. The gist of it is that the government is saying it's wrong that some people should have a basic human right fulfilled by access to superior health care, and others should not, by virtue of the fact that they depend upon us, the African National Congress, the state health system for care. We have failed. It's a failure. Therefore, private health and the taxpayer must take responsibility for ensuring that the poorest of the poor, the people that we, the government, are supposed to take care of, have access to identical standards of health care as those of people who belong to medical aid schemes or who can afford to go to private medical institutions, be they clinics or doctors or hospitals, etc. With the result that calculations have been made that in the first year, just in providing the basic health care, there's a list of, I think they call it PMBs, I forget what it stands for, of primary medical benefits, I think it means. About 40 all told. So the first things that anybody should provide, the lowest tier of the pyramid, if you like. If you imagine the apex or the capstone of the pyramid being brain surgery, at the lowest tier, it's the simplest things. That just in providing that, there will be a shortfall of something like 626 billion rand in terms of the government's budget for healthcare, because it is going to have to pay these medical service providers. 626 billion rand. It has two implications. The first is for the health industry. The government is going to dictate the schedule of tariffs. In other words, if you as a doctor, private doctor, treat somebody who's poor for, I don't know, gangrene or something, quite a serious thing, requires lots of treatment, lots of antibiotics, operations, cutting out throat and then having to have it incinerated, the government will tell you what it shall pay you. That will be the death of private health care in South Africa. The other ramification, immediate ramification, is that taxes are going to have to be levied just to cover those tariffs, the 600 billion shortfall. Never mind if we were to talk about market-related prices being charged by competent, capable, well-equipped doctors who've invested well in their education and well in their surgeries and their staff and so on. The increase in taxation will be available in the document linked, but it will break, let it suffice to say that it will break the income tax base such as remains in South Africa. And I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that everybody is missing the point here. Everybody, all of the observers, all of the clever people, all of the political commentators, everybody seems to think that this is really, actually, genuinely and truly about the poor, the dispossessed, the marginalized, and the votes. Those two things. I put it to you that one day we will look back and know that it was only to do with the National Democratic Revolution, specifically to do with colonialism of a special type. How do you destroy colonialism if it's deeply embedded, if the people have been there for hundreds of years and they're in large numbers? You dispossess them of everything. I put it to you that hot on the heels of this, within the next few years, we will see the prescribed assets bill dictating that life insurance and investment and pension companies pay 20% of their revenue each month to the government to be deployed as the government sees best fit. And if that doesn't break us utterly, it won't be long thereafter. I'm positive before the next elections, if there is to be a next election, expropriation without compensation. Yesterday, Elon Musk, hero of the conservatives, revealed on Twitter the first Neuralink chip implant patient in a human brain. So he revealed the patient, excuse my sentence construction. The patient is a young guy, I suppose, in his roughly late 20s, wheelchair bound, American guy. He's got the chip in his brain. Now he controls his computer and his roll stool, his wheelchair with his brain. And it's supposedly a tremendous success. And Elon Musk advertised for people to become the second recipient. Here it begins, ladies and gentlemen. We warned of this 2 years ago, in the year 2022, the same day that Elon Musk revealed that the first patient, the first prospective recipient of a Neuralink chip in their brain had been identified, but it was confidential, and that the chip had been completed. This was in roughly August, September of 2022, and that the operation would be completed by March of last year. The past week has seen 3 major revelations by some of the world's top scientists. If you're on my WhatsApp groups, then you know what I'm talking about, of unusual illnesses that have cropped up since 2021. If you haven't seen those videos, endeavor to obtain copies of them, links to them, have a look at them. I will describe just one to you. In the history of the world, up until 3 years ago, there were only 10 recorded cases of a specific illness that eats away the prefrontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex of your brain, this part of your brain. Now, this part of your brain, I'm oversimplifying, but not by much, is what separates you from my dog Judith. My Belgian Malinois Judith procreates. Her cell structure is very similar to that of a human being. She eats, she breathes, she consumes water, she seeks shelter. If she whelps, she looks after those whelps, those puppies. She functions as a mammal in terms of feeding them, in terms of showing them how to look after their food. But what she does not do is pair for life, build cathedrals, invest life's work in many cases in health, in education, and so on. Here is where resides civilization. And those peoples who have larger prefrontal cortexes are always, without exception, the best exponents of the development of civilization. Since just a few years ago, there has been a sudden rash, an unbelievable explosion of this certain particular illness in the prefrontal cortex of people in the world. This illness eats away at the prefrontal cortex. Watch the video. Listen to the world's top psychiatrist, not psychologist, psychiatrist. Somebody who deals with the structure and chemistry of the brain, not a psychologist who lets you lie on their couch and tell you all of their problems and then tell you you're not so bad, come back next week. If you give me another $1,000, I'll let you talk to me again. It's a completely different field and profession. The world's top psychiatrist explained to you how this is happening and how it is that the first thing that goes as this occurs, this eating away, is our capacity for love, or the capacity for love of those people who are suffering this illness. It has been a very, very, very big week for that, and as I say, some similar other revelations of illnesses that have emerged in recent years. On a similar note, on Wednesday, an assassination attempt was made upon the life of the Slovakian Prime Minister, the famous country of Czechoslovakia, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the breakup of the Soviet Union, and then of the Warsaw Pact, that is to say those Eastern Bloc countries that allied themselves to the Soviet Union, but which were not part of the Soviet Union. The country of Czechoslovakia split up in the 90s into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, when up to 5 rounds were fired into him by a handgun wielded by a liberal 71-year-old poet at very close range. Fico has adopted a genuinely conservative approach as Prime Minister and has called, for instance, adoption in same-sex marriage a perversion. And he had that day appointed a conservative to head a commission of inquiry into certain toxic medical treatments administered by global pharmaceutical companies in Slovakia in the years 2020, 21, 22, and as recently as early 2023. It has been revealed by Statistics South Africa that unemployment increased by 22% over the past 5 years, up to the end of the first quarter of this year, 2024. 22% in 5 years. It begs the question, how do you do it? How do you achieve that? I can only say, at the risk of losing my temper and ranting and raving and carrying on like a madman in this video, may it please God to open our eyes to what is happening in this country. We may prepare accordingly, because if you extrapolate, like a line on a graph, X, Y axis, standard 7 maths, Mr. Sissison's class, Mr. Sissison, he was a nice guy. If you extrapolate that, what shall our unemployment be 5 years from now, or 10 or 15? Clearly, we are standing on the precipice of the abyss. Last but not least, the Daily Maverick online newspaper has released a promotional video encouraging people to support independent journalism. A video in which they cited a few stories to make the point that independent journalism is valuable and therefore worth supporting. Please support us. What we do is useful. Look, I'm telling you nice stories. You didn't know, bet you didn't know this, right? And if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't know it. So help me. Donate, subscribe to the Daily Maverick. One of those stories revealed in that video that between 2010 and 2022, the Passenger Rail Authority of South Africa's annual passengers journeys, SAPRAS's annual passengers journeys, fell from about 500 million a year to 19 million per year.
When we talk about corruption in South Africa, it can often seem like an abstract concept. But if you really want to understand its real-life consequences, look no further than the collapse of South Africa's train services. The looting of PRASA, South Africa's passenger rail service, began in 2012 under the leadership of CEO Lucky Montana. If you want to understand the scale of the graft, a Treasury investigation which looked into 216 contracts awarded between 2012 and 2015 found that only 13 were legit. The total value of those contracts was around 15 billion rand. The result of this corruption has been the destruction of South Africa's commuter rail service. In 2010, local rail passengers were making around 500 million train journeys a year. By 2022, this figure had fallen to 19 million. In Cape Town, the most significant metro rail line, servicing underprivileged communities like Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain, has effectively not been operational since 2019. According to estimates, this has forced an additional 1 million passengers on the road daily, whereas previously they would have used trains. Now let's talk about Transnet, the government's custodian of ports, rail, and pipelines. Transnet is in charge of the trains that transport cargo rather than humans. The scale of corruption at Transnet was the largest since the arms deal contract in the 1990s. To give just one example, a contract was signed with the Chinese Rolling Railway Stock Corporation in 2014 to buy just over 1,000 locomotives to the value of 54.4 billion rand, with almost a quarter of that price being channeled to Gupta-owned companies. Of the trains which have arrived from this contract, they've been late and pretty much useless. This, in combination with the full picture of Transnet corruption and a spiraling issue with criminal syndicates stealing cables, has meant that the ability of local businesses to transport their goods via rail has been drastically reduced. So how are those goods being transported now? Via road, which is presenting huge problems for roads and for traffic. In fact, the heavy volume of trucks on our road now is tearing up road infrastructure. This is the reason for many of our potholes, because the roads simply cannot take this kind of pounding. Trucks also account for almost 10% of fatal crashes on South African roads these days, according to a recent report from the Road Traffic Management Corporation. So together, the collapse of PRASA and Transnet have made all our lives more difficult in multiple different ways. That's the thing about corruption. It isn't just abstract, it brings down nations. And this is why we need civil society and we need journalism, to expose corruption and to put pressure on those in power to hold the corrupt accountable. Help us to keep busting the bad guys.
There are two things to say. The first is, I know some of those people personally and individually, people at the Daily Maverick. And I'd like to remind them that you are the self-same people, the self-same people, the self-same denizens of Rosebank, Killarney, Upper Houghton, Lower Houghton, who told us that this would never happen and that we could rest assured that we were in good hands. And everything that our eyes could see was false. And that we should trust the propaganda and not our lying eyes. You've a damn cheek to speak the way you're speaking now. The second thing to say is that once again we are looking at dire signs. We've all seen the videos that we've placed on the national leadership groups and various other WhatsApp groups over the past year of the thousands of kilometers of tracks that have been stolen, of the thousands of kilometers of third rails, that is to say electricity cables, that's the English phrase for it. We've learned in recent decades about the billions and billions and billions of rands worth of theft from Transnet and from PRASA, of coaches that don't work, of engines that don't work. We've learned how the main, for want of a better word, the chief railway line on the entire continent of Africa, the one between Durban and Johannesburg, cannot run at even 50% capacity. The writing is on the wall. Join Suidlanders, become active, prepare for the inevitable. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this video. We wish you everything of the best in your preparations. Goodbye and God bless all of you.